I'm pretty fed up. I think most people can agree that the world is shit right now. Men and women are so far apart in the way that they think, not even including the vastly different experiences of gender diverse folk. It's unsurprising nobody seems to ever agree or get along about gender issues when every person has such a different experience with gender. Before we continue, I want to preface this video with a trigger warning for racism, sexual assault, sexism, and violence. So, if those are some things you think could potentially worsen your mood, I would take care. I mean, I'm obviously preaching to the choir if you have experiences related to these things, so don't feel obligated to continue watching. However, this discussion is extremely important for others to hear, even if you're not Australian. I mean, these are issues that plague the world and concerts and music everywhere. I also want to give a disclaimer as we are talking about women's issues that I identify as non binary, but I am AFAB, meaning assigned female at birth. So most people kind of just assume I am a woman just from looking at me, treat me like such because I am quite femme presenting. I remember the first time a man ever tried to catcall me, I was only 14 years old in my school uniform. I think if you ask any AFAB person, woman, or femme presenting person in general, just they'll have some horrendous story about a man. If every girl you know has a story, why are we still not listening? I'm not gonna sit here and preach to you about why men are bad, why we should be afraid of men. I don't believe that. I honestly believe that the majority of men are trying their best, but I don't think it's enough. I think there's a lot of systemic issues that lead men to have hatred towards women, to see them as less, to feel as though they can lay their hands on a woman without consent at any time, let alone at a concert. I mean, it's just horrendous. And there's the saying of if there's a bag of chips and a couple of the chips in the bag are poison, you're not going to want to eat the bag of chips because you're afraid of the bag of chips being poison. That's kind of essentially the same argument for men is if a couple of men are ruining it for the rest of them, of course you're afraid of all men because it could just happen to be one of the poison chips. I believe that the divide between men and women is getting greater for a few reasons, including what I just stated, which is fear. I think that we're becoming increasingly disconnected from the world and in turn each other due to our use of technology. I think that men build up this image of the perfect girl in their heads and they struggle to see women as people. They reduce them to their appearances, they see them as this alien thing that is different, and honestly, men and women aren't that different. People who aren't men can still enjoy the same media, the same music, the same interests. We can have the same opinions. We can do anything and everything a man can. So, why are we treated so differently in the same spaces? A man awkwardly approaching a woman and failing to court her on his part could be seen as an embarrassing failure, or perhaps even becoming angry at the girl for rejecting him. But on the woman's part, this can be seen as creepy and scary and possibly, yeah, just a terrifying interaction. So, how does this divide in understanding exist? Well, I think with the rise in domestic violence and disturbing crimes against women, we're all on edge. When 20% of the population has experienced some kind of domestic violence, which is 3.8 million people, domestic violence is definitely a hot issue in Australia right now, and it's no surprise that we are all feeling a little bit scared of men. When you turn on the TV, you see another woman has died from domestic violence. You turn on your YouTube, you see another woman has been brutally murdered in a way you didn't even think was imaginable by your favorite true crime podcaster who is profiting off of the death of these people by making it into a spectacle to scare you so that you stay further watching their content so you can see, well, how do I avoid this happening to me. um I like true crime podcasts, but I think that they have a lot of issues, but that's besides the point today. Not to mention, everybody has their own stories and experiences from our past, comments or actions made to us by men that reinforce our fear. When women are scared of men and men simply don't understand this fear, it is clearly easy to see why the divide is so large, especially when our concerns, fears, and safety are constantly being ignored or outright blamed on us by men. It is never the victim's fault for being assaulted. So let's just preface that. I don't care what they're wearing, doing, or where they were. I don't give a shit. No always means no. If somebody's telling you no, that is no. If you can't understand that, you're a threat who does not respect the autonomy of others. And it goes without saying, no answer is still a no, or anything other than an enthusiastic yes is a no. And obviously, when I say our fear or we, I mean the collective worry that anyone faces when we are accosted or found attractive by a man. I'm not exempt to this just because I'm non-binary, unfortunately, and many people like myself who are gender diverse still face the same misogyny and issues as women. So it is an issue that impacts not just women, but anyone who a man finds attractive, you know? How is 1 in 6 women in Australia not enough for people to listen? A woman in Australia is killed every 11 days because of domestic violence, alarmingly higher than the male average. In not even a fortnight, a woman is killed every year. How are we still not listening to the concerns of women? This all obviously isn't either to erase the experience of male victims. Men and women are both victims of the patriarchy of domestic violence, and I think it's important to remember that male victims are valid and need to be supported and believed. However, this video is primarily specifically about the experiences of women's violence and how prevalent and commonplace it is in Australia. I will be touching more on the male experience of sexual assault later in this video, as I do think it's important to talk about. However, it's not the main focus due to the incident which has occurred. What incident, you're probably wondering after all of that exposition where I just preached at you. On the 31st of January this year, a popular pub rock style Melbourne band, Amyl and the Sniffers, played a show at the Brisbane venue, the Tivoli. I feel like this video, I'd like to give some additional information. I actually attended the Amyl and the Sniffers gig, but the one at the Sunny Coast, because Brisbane sold out. Also, personally, I don't really like the Tivoli. The atmosphere isn't really for me, and for lack of a better word, very straggedy. I personally didn't really want to go there. Had a bad feeling about the atmosphere there for years. I've just been avoiding going to any show there, and hearing what has happened to so many women that night, I'm really glad I didn't go, and I don't know if I would go again, to be honest. So, yeah, but however, I had some similar experiences at the Sunny Coast that I will go into later. Amyl and the Sniffers is fronted by the lovely Amy Taylor, who I really adore. I think she's fiery, and she actually opened both shows with the message verbatim: do not touch anyone who does not want to be touched. That is very clear. The band's views about women's rights and safety are blatantly clear. So why are some of the male audience that they fostered indifferent to their beliefs? When we consume media, I've always believed we consume things we agree with, things we want to support because we agree or relate in some kind of way. When you look at Amyl's music, it has a broad range of appeal for men or women, which is why there are so many women at their shows who need to feel safe. If this is what the women want, if this is what the band advocates, how are we failing? Where are we going wrong? Amy's new music has a lot of songs for the girls, such as Tiny Bikini, Jerkin, or the aptly named Me and the Girls. But when you look at their older music like Freaks to the Front or Security, it can appeal to anyone, especially men who tend to gravitate towards their band when they have that kind of music that is designed to get you rowdy and moshing and having a good time. It's understandable why the crowd can be so hectic, but it is no excuse for sexual assault or crushing people, which are two things that we will be discussing that occurred. 5 days after the show at the Tivoli, a local Brisbane page, keeping.brisbane.alive, made an Instagram post detailing their experiences and the experiences of the other female audience members at the AML shows. And I want to warn again, the descriptions of what have occurred are very graphic. So this is your final warning. But for now, we will just be reading the description of what Amaya has said. I've had many women around the country reach out to me with their stories asking what my email was like. So I thought I'd post the email right here with the full detail of my experiences. I felt so much anger and frustration and helplessness when writing this email on a Sunday morning at midnight. I shouldn't be in this position in the first place. The humiliation and violation of what occurred isn't okay. To stand in a room stripped legs bare, covered in hands that aren't yours, trapped and targeted racially. It's so incredibly violating and draining and traumatizing. But I spoke out for all the other women. I will now be talking to the venue, which has thankfully responded really well. I am turning my anger and grief and sadness into power, and power makes change. I will not sit here silently as I continue to hear stories from other women. I will continue to be loud, make noise, shake rooms and norms to make people listen. We deserve better, and the bare minimum for women is safety. I agree. I think that all of us together is what makes change, and that's why we're talking about this today, is to boost the voices of these people and to say that enough is enough. We want to feel safe when we go to concerts. So I'm making this video in solidarity with you, Amaya. I hope that that is okay. It is not my story to tell, but I feel like from your bravery sharing this, I could not read this post as somebody who attended and say nothing. So that is why this video is happening. Please, if you feel confident enough and have capacity, email the venues you saw Amel and the Sniffers at. This is an issue way bigger than I ever could have comprehended all around Australia and the world. And outside of Amel and the Sniffers, women just deserve to be safe. The music industry and spaces, as I've learned, are unfortunately usually not. And enough is enough. I agree, unfortunately, and you'll see as I continue why I agree that the music industry and spaces are unfortunately not safe for women. I'm going to insert the entire email exchange between Amaya and the Tivoli so you can understand her experiences and concerns. So pause to read the entire thing or check it out on her page, keeping.brisbane.alive on Instagram, and show them some support. But I will be summarizing the events now. So the main issues that Amaya and the other women faced were crushing from the crowd, being unable to breathe and move without any escape, which can literally and has literally killed people at shows. No way to signal for help. She said this was due to her height. Her skirt was ripped off and she could not put it back on. Her glasses were taken by a man and she was unable to see. Men in the crowd taunted her and would not give her glasses back, threatening to break them and holding them out of reach. Her legs and breasts were groped by men who were strangers in the crowd. So for those 2 points, I would like to specify that it was not just one man in this crowd, it was multiple men. It essentially felt like everybody around her was in on this mentality of being, one, racist, which we will talk about, and being sexist, like feeling like they can just taunt her and treat her like she is not a human being. I mean, I can't imagine how bloody terrifying it is to feel like everyone around you just does not give a shit about you and your safety and your well-being as a human person, like as a human being. And I just feel so freaking angry and upset for a male hearing this, and that is why we're talking about it, because it is so viscerally angry. It was not just one man. So if you're sitting there being like, one guy at the concert touched some girl and now, like, you are part of the problem. It is not just one man that does this to a woman. It is a societal issue. So that is why we're talking about this today. It is just unacceptable. Many women were visibly distressed or crying in the crowd with no assistance from staff. They asked for the touching to stop many times and it continued. When Amel played her feminist songs about wanting to feel safe, men booed. I can only assume from the set list, this is the one where she's got, I've got my knifey, it gets me home at night and I feel safe. That one's a banger. So I'm assuming it's probably that one. So the booing really shows the disconnect in the audience to the band's beliefs, as we discussed, which apparently also fueled the aggressiveness of the crowd to become worse. They did not like the song, they booed, they got angrier. That is something that Amaya herself points out is the disconnect in the male audience. She experienced incredible amounts of racism, with people implying she shouldn't be there or even like the genre of pub rock, which is the most bogan white man racist take I've ever heard. Men, you gotta pull your mates' heads in if they think like this. You know, the bar is not just for men, the bar is not just for white people. The bar really shouldn't be a staple in the Australian culture when you think about how bad our drinking culture is, but the bar is a staple for anyone to go to. Loves Amel is for anyone to go to. If you think that people can't like something just because they're different to you, you have the mentality of a small child. I don't know what else to say to you. Maya herself points out the disconnect from the male audience as just seeing Amy as a pretty face, which is sadly true. Not Amel's fault at all, but men see her sex appeal, they see her outfits, they see the way she's photographically marketing herself and her style, and unfortunately they don't fucking listen to a word she says. And that's obviously, as I said, not Amy's fault, but a byproduct of the sexism cultivated here in Australia, ingrained in our very culture, where men don't believe women can even like the same things, let alone a woman of colour. And I have experienced this myself, where you tell a man, hey, I like this thing, and they're just like, the classic age-old joke of name 5 bands. Well, it is true there are men that simply cannot fathom that a girl can like something that is traditionally seen as male by them, or something for specifically them. Mayor's post finally is just advocating for the inclusivity of women and people of colour in the Australian music industry and concerts in the scene, and I agree, it is a problem that seriously needs to be addressed. Even on a smaller scale, I've witnessed sexism at shows, as in smaller shows. A close friend of mine was playing a show at Rick's Bar, a local Brisbane venue, which I hate for a lot of reasons, but the venue did nothing to ensure her safety while performing. It was during COVID, and we all had to sit and wear masks, but two men were just running around without masks right at the front of the stage, not seated, so already breaking the venue's rules, as implied by themselves, but they're buying a shit ton of drinks, so why kick them out, right? And while she was playing, the men began to make gross sexual comments about her and heckle her. And no offense to my lovely friend, but she's not a celebrity. She's just a local girlie making music right now. It is the start of her career, and even the shit is happening to her. And then you just allowed this behaviour, because, well, like, they're buying drinks, why kick them out? Just because the girls feel unsafe? This is the kind of mentality that the venues have. To do as little as possible and make sure people buy alcohol. And obviously, it's not every venue like that. I've been to venues where I've felt safe. But sometimes it does just feel like the venue is trying to stay alive, especially during COVID. They're not going to just start kicking people out just because of any reason, unless they're physically fighting, unless it's just... At what point do we draw the line and we say, like, this person needs to be kicked out, this person, just because they're buying alcohol, like, doesn't matter, like, they need to be kicked out, like... Anyway, if men can't even take the women we see on stage seriously, what hope do the women in the crowd have? I really want you to think about that. If this is happening to the performers, if people are not listening to my friend, if people are not listening to Amy, why would they listen to just a girl in the crowd? Obviously, every girl is equal, every girl matters. It's not the person on the stage and the person in the crowd, but when you think about it, they can't even respect the person that they idolize, that they're going to see to play music. They can't even respect that woman on a fucking human level. How are they going to respect any woman? Brisbane music scene has a serious sexism issue, and I've been feeling really unsafe for years. Sadly, as Amaya pointed out in her post, it's not just the Tivoli, it's not just Brisbane. There's women all over the country and the world experiencing violence at concerts and in their everyday lives, and yeah, just violence in general from men. So what has the response been to the situation? Amel actually responded in defense of their audience who fell victim to the misogyny and violence at their concerts. It's come to my attention that some people at the Tivoli show experienced assault. That's so fucked up. Thanks to the people that spoke up. Your voice is always heard. This is not the first time something has gotten back to us about a person, mostly women, experiencing assault at a show. Have said this a million times in a million ways, so I don't know why you aren't listening to me, but don't touch anyone who doesn't want to be touched. Consensual moshing only. And fuck anyone who isn't got it clear that this is not a space for groping or worse. Don't come to the show if you're about that. This is a worldwide problem because sadly music is not a sanctuary from society, it is a microcosm of it. I can't pronounce that word, I'm sorry. Feminist politics are at the forefront of our shows and music, period. Check your head before someone checks it for you with their boot. I love the way Amy speaks. She speaks from the heart, she speaks exactly how she is, she doesn't sugarcoat it, and yes, these things need to be said. Unfortunately, I don't think everyone is listening, and the people that need to hear it obviously are the men who are doing these things, and I don't think it's getting through to them, unfortunately. This is probably the sixth or so time I've had to write something like this about assault specifically, so I'm at the end of my tether. Gals, I know you know Amel shows are for you to let it rip. It's mostly men, so I want to address the boys. Everyone's from different walks of life, so here's some ways you might be able to help. I love men and blokes and boys because they're rich tapestries, so fellas, are you really gonna let the shit ones represent you and give you a bad name? And I want to focus on that for a minute. Exactly, you might be watching this by chance right now and you might be a guy and you might be thinking, I would never do that to somebody. I'm a good guy. Like, I understand consent. I'm not stupid. I know that women are just people, right? You still have an obligation to stick up for the people around you, especially the women around you, because your words have weight in a situation with another man. All it takes for you to do is to be like, hey, that is really lame. Lame. why would you say that? That's the lamest thing I've ever heard. Lame. Like, all you have to do is something like that, and you immediately make that other guy feel insecure about whatever stupid comment he just made. Like, you have the power here. If a woman does that, and I've done this before, where I've tried to make fun of men who have just said something stupid, if they inherently do not respect you just because you are a woman, you immediately, your words carry less weight. There is some power to being a man, and that is why we have to work together. We have to stick up for each other. We have to respect each other. So if you have power in a situation like that, you have to use it. You have to do some amount of policing the people around you. If you are a good person, you have to not just care about what you're doing, you have to care about what the people around you are doing and what those repercussions are as well. If you're seeing that the pit is dudes only, can you make space for the ladies too? I will be talking more about how you should be using your space effectively in a crowd like this later, but it is true. If you are bigger than somebody else, especially if you are taller or if you are heavier, you immediately need to make sure that you are not pushing or moshing around with people that are significantly smaller than you and crushing them, because this is how crushing occurs, is when smaller people in a crowd, and it's not always smaller people, sometimes it is just anyone, but smaller people are at more risk, especially children or smaller girls or smaller men. They are at risk of being crushed in a crowd, so you need to be conscientious of your space. Can you check in on the gals if it looks like a dude's being creepy? Maybe this is weird to do, so you could always ask a venue staff to go check for you. So exactly, you might not feel confident talking to this guy. He might fuck you up. You might be a bit scared. You're not the biggest guy yourself. Understandable. I'm not the strongest, biggest person myself either. Do something. Don't just bloody walk away and ignore it. Like, seriously, there's like a million other things you could do than just ignore. Also, if you've got a friend being way too litty, drunk, or saying off-putting shit, let them know to shut the fuck up. That one's simple enough. Amy said that pretty clearly. You'd probably be doing your mate a favor, so just get him to knock it off. Again, I just love the way Amy speaks. She speaks exactly how it is. She says it how it is, and there's no denying where the band stands. Her colloquial charm is what makes the band so endearing and so broadly appealing to Australians. It's just a shame for all the women here. The victims don't want this shit happening. Amy doesn't want this shit happening. She doesn't want to feel like she's putting on a show for a bunch of creeps. She wants the men and the women to feel safe and have a good time at her shows. She also responded directly to a mayor over email, which I'll show now. Hey there, Amy here. I hope you don't mind. My manager reached out to get your email. Hey Mayor, here is what I posted and wrote. It's a bit crude, that's just the way I speak, haha. I also tried to include something more pointed at the boys. Again, I'm so sorry, I hope you have a good weekend, appreciate you. So, it is clear that Amy does give a fuck what's happening at her shows, and she gives a fuck about these women, and yet her audience is still not listening to her, which I find so disrespectful. I find so disheartening, to be honest, as a fellow AFAB person in music, to think that you could cultivate and build an audience, and that audience could have members in it, like a large majority, because people are experiencing this all across animal shows, to have such a large vocal part of your fan base be just these misogynistic fuckheads that don't listen to a word you say. I feel so, my heart goes out to Amy. What is she meant to do about this? It's not her fault.
I'd like to dedicate it to the fellas in the audience. Fellas, there's a fucking problem not just in Australia, but all over the world. We fucking love you, we fucking need you. Look out for us. Shit's getting crazy. Last year, 101 women were killed. That's only the women that we hear about being murdered. You don't hear about the ladies at home suffering and struggling. You don't hear about any of that. So fellas, look out for us. Call out your mates. You see your mates being weird? Call them out. It's chill to do that. Fucking, yeah, we need ya. Girls just want to get lit and enjoy themselves. We're sick of working hard. We're sick of carrying the weight.
Amy, honestly, don't worry about the tone of anything you've said ever. Like, you're speaking from the heart what needs to be said to these blokes, and they're just not getting it. Mainstream media has also reported on the situation, such as this post highlighted on keeping.brisbane.alive, again by a mayor. That Aussie rock band explodes after fans groped at Brisbane show. And again, I'm not trying to make light of this, but I do think it is very, very funny that, of course, an Australian news article just starts with the word fucked up. Like, just get your attention. Just get your attention right off the bat. It's fucked up. You gotta read this one. I feel like only Australians would do that. But anyway, Aussie rock band Animal and the Sniffers has publicly slammed the behaviour of some fans after multiple women claim to have been inappropriately touched in the crowd of a Brisbane show. Long-time listener Amaya, 20, and she's only 20. I know this happens to women who are younger. It happened to me, even younger than that, but I'm 23 now. 20 is a baby. To have all of these things happen to you at such a young age, just, it makes me want to fight somebody. It makes me angry. Maya is 20, is one of multiple women claiming they were groped and harassed by male fans during the concert on January 31st. So, that is the post, that is the description, and if you've ever been to the comment section of a news article, you're sure to see some of the most brain-dead conservative boomer responses imaginable, and this collection of comments is no exception. This was highlighted by Amaya to showcase some of the types of male thinking that we're up against here, and it is just horrendous. Out of all of these comments, which I can only assume are left by men, a comment I'd really like to highlight is this one. Can't recall doing any groping in my days. Which took my breath away when I read it, honestly. It got my full attention. But lost count of the number of times I was on the receiving end, dismissed, and moved on. Which I think is very sad, and I'd like to talk more about that. I can't tell the gender of this poster, but from the picture, I'm going to go with the assumption this person is male. And I want to preface, all of these comments are directed at the victim of this situation, at the victims. They are just horrendous. To say this about anyone who's been assaulted, to minimize the damages and effects that happen, and I'm about to go into why I think this mentality exists. Fellas, you should not be getting touched either. We're fighting with you. This is your fight too. This is all of ours. I want to bring up my experiences at the sunny coast now because I feel it is relevant. I was with a friend of mine who is male, cis male, he's straight, and he's somebody people wouldn't think of as a typical victim when you consider sexual assault. But he was constantly being grabbed by men and hugged, and at one point a man grabbed him and kissed him on the lips without consent. He pushed the guy off and he's like, "What the fuck you doing, guy? Like, what's going on?" And the guy goes, "Sorry, I'm on MD." Like, that is no excuse to touch someone against their will. If you can't handle yourself on drugs, you should not be doing them, especially around other people. I've been pretty fucked up in my life. I've got pretty litty, and I've never done something like that. I've never touched somebody against their will. I've never acted like a fool. And I've been pretty fucked up. I think drugs and alcohol is never a cop-out excuse. You still have the free will. Even if you are under the influence, you are still making the decision to hurt that person. It is not the alcohol that is telling you to do it, It is an influence of why you might make that decision. It might give you some kind of inebriated state that allows you to make that decision, which is why you can't consent to sex when you're under the influence. However, at the end of the day, you chose to touch this person. So I never want to hear the argument that, oh, he was just drunk, he didn't mean it. It's just bullshit. And we need to leave that thinking behind in the year of 2025, or we're never gonna fucking progress as a society. Hit my mic. How do I think that this happened to my friend? I don't think it was because the perpetrator was gay. So if you're thinking that, just knock that out of your head for a minute. Like, that's stupid. Honestly, honest to God, from witnessing the interaction, I think the guy just simply knew he couldn't touch a woman. So being on drugs, if you know a little bit about MD, I've never taken it, but I know a little bit about it, it's one of those drugs where when you touch some part of somebody, it doesn't even necessarily have to be for a sexual reason, just touching somebody feels really good on that drug. So I think he knew that if he started groping, touching up a woman, she's gonna freak and then gonna get kicked out, and he knows there's negative repercussions. However, some men do think that it's funny or okay to touch a guy without his consent, and it is never okay to do that. Men's feelings obviously matter too. You should not be groping or touching your friend as a joke, because it's just humiliating. Goes for girls too. Don't drunkenly cling to men you don't know who are not reciprocating. Don't be pushy. Men's feelings are valid. They matter too. And they're not something that should be ignored or considered unmanly for expressing. expressing. Teaching men to not have emotions about things and to condition them to be unemotional is what leads to apathy and emotional ignorance of men when faced with women's issues. If they see it as trivial or not a big deal when they have to suck it up and move on if it happens to them, of course they can't fucking see why it would totally destroy a woman to experience something like this. They're told that if it happens to them, to just move on. We need to uncondition ourselves from the toxic mentality we have that men need to be strong all the time. It is strong to show emotions and to give a fuck about something. It is one of the most human and attractive qualities you can have, is to give a fuck about something. As well as this incident, I would also like to preface that I experienced the crushing that Amaya was talking about as well. I'm not that short, I'm not that tall, I'm a pretty admirable 5'6", and that's pretty good. It's perfect, I reckon. But in a crowd, I'm by no means the biggest. So there were many men and women that were bigger than me, pushing me, throwing me around. And I was also with a friend's sister, as she's a child. It was an all ages gig. I mean, she's just a kid. She's barely 90 pounds. And I had to protect her from the shoving of the crowd and the pushing as best I could. And there were just waves of people moshing. Even into the sections where people weren't moshing, they would forcibly push into these people, just, I don't know, just to piss them off. It was just very odd. People were running through the crowd, they were knocking people over. It was pretty violent. I fell into another girl. I profusely apologized, and she literally said to me, it's okay. I know it wasn't you. And I jokingly said, like, I will protect you. And I stood in front of her, and I was like half joking, but I was bracing like against the waves of people just to keep her okay. And we should be having this kind of solidarity. It shows where we respect that it is a confined small space. There are people that are smaller than you. You have to be conscious of the space you are using, especially if you are bigger. The force of your body can seriously hurt someone. We just need to have better etiquette and just compassion in crowds for the people around us. So I can personally attest, I experienced the crushing as well. And it was incredibly hot from all the bodies and shoving. People threw their beer all over me and others with no regard. I mean, in this economy, you're throwing your beer away, brother. Lord. A really big issue I want to bring up with the stadium, again, at the Sunny Coast specifically, is they did not offer free water. And which I didn't even think was legal to do at a gig due to health and safety concerns of, like, passing out and stuff. But it was 6 fucking AUD a bottle, huh? And you won't even let me bring in my own bottle because you think it's gonna be like vodka or some shit. Get fucked. Water needs to be provided for free. Dehydration and crushing in crowds can literally lead to death. And I know water seems so trivial in comparison to literal assault and fucking racism faced, but I think it's important that we bring up these conditions are not ideal. They're dangerous to everyone right now, and there needs to be more security and regulation and just fucking assistance here from the venues. Successfully established that the Australian music scene, especially the rock scene with bands like Amel, are rife with sexism. We are talking about it. We're making noise. So what can we realistically do about it? I think I don't have a definitive answer to this. I'm pretty nervous talking about this topic. This is my first video and I felt compelled to make it. At the end of the day, I'm just a mentally ill, struggling idiot who can't give you the bloody end-all be-all answer to solving sexism when it is such a complicated issue. But I can give some suggestions, and I've given some suggestions throughout the video. I want to hear what you think in the comments. I'd love if you could share this video, or just give it a like and comment what you think we could do to fix things at the moment, or just share your experiences in solidarity if you're comfortable doing so. Have you had a negative experience at a concert? Men, women, non-binary people, anyone. I'd like to hear your experiences of being at a concert, because I've obviously had some great concert experiences, and I've obviously had some less good concert experiences. I think change comes from all of us, all of our ideas. We obviously need increased security of some kind, and we need to be able to flag down and respond to these situations as they're occurring in the crowd so people can have assistance and perpetrators can be punished. As it stands now, there's very few ways to identify and punish individuals in crowds who grope people at shows. One suggestion I saw, which I somewhat agree with, is we have boxes in the crowd so that security are already placed ready to go and respond to these situations, which saves them from having to come outside of the group and inwards. But in my opinion, I think security could have a better view doing that, because they, at the moment, at least at the animal shows, they stood on the outside and they kind of just pointed at people who were like getting on shoulders, and they were telling people, you can't crowd surf, you can't do this, because yeah, in Australia you can't really crowd surf, there's really big fines for it. It's really silly. I love Fortitude Valley, but they've got a massive bloody sign that makes them look like a bunch of narcs, where it says, fucking don't you dare bloody jump off this stage now, eh? I'm like, don't you dare, they got it in their bloody rules right next to the stage, you better not do no stage diving. Don't even think about it. Which I think is kind of lame, but I understand. I do like the idea about the boxers in the crowd, but I also see how it could be detrimental to the enjoyment of the experience to have just people standing like way above the rest of everybody else. Like, how are you gonna see anything if there's people towering all throughout the crowd? How are you gonna get your nice Instagram post video? It's just a lot of questions there, but I do really like the ability that they could have to watch the crowd and directly respond. Like, what other options do we really have? When people like Amaya are too short to signal for help, how can we ensure these people are able to get assistance in an emergency? What if it wasn't an assault? What if someone small is just being crushed and unable to get help? And they can't signal? What if they die? Managing the crowd at a show is the most important step to ensuring the safety of the crowd. I think another great suggestion that I saw is to have a designated area, either specifically for women or an area for families as well, where people like smaller children who are also at risk and more vulnerable can escape these moshes and into a sectioned off area. I'll be honest, because it's my channel, I'm going to voice my opinion. You know what, I'm going to say I hate the idea of gender segregation as a solution to anything. I think it's stupid. I think that it is only serving to broaden the differences between men and women and have us become more afraid of men. But I understand, I'm not going to sit here and say women should not have safe spaces. They should not feel like they have an area specifically for them. That is silly, especially with the severity of what is occurring. However, I do feel that the solution to women's violence being to become more afraid of men, to segregate ourselves further from men, only serves to distance ourselves from men and their understanding of us. And I think that all of these issues are kind of what is causing men to think that women are so different, even though they're really not. I do like this idea, and I do think it is tricky when you think about who is included in this safe space against men, because I hate to be that person, but women are not the only people at risk of violence against men. Other men are, trans men are, non-binary people like myself are, trans women most certainly are. And if we're having these spaces, are we going to police who's going into them? Are we going to just let anyone who needs the space use it? I think that there's a lot of questions to be asked here. Personally, I think anyone should be able to use a designated space away from the mosh. I think that our solution being women only does not help everybody. But I'm not going to sit here and tell women they can't have like a nice safe space. That would be silly of me. But those are my concerns when thinking about that solution. How can we effectively combat the sexist views of the Australian man? We can't scream, don't touch us, until our faces are blue. We can attest that we are human beings, and yet we're still treated as less than such in the space of our interests. We can scream as much as we want, don't touch us, and they just do not listen. So what can we realistically do? Who's in... The light is going crazy out there, I'm so sorry. Who's in charge of fixing this? Is it Amel, who wants change? Is it up to them to ensure every venue they're playing at is complying to safety regulations and looking after the crowd over hundreds of venues over multiple countries? Or is it the venue? Is it the government? Is it up to them to regulate, to force venues to comply to stricter safety codes? What if a venue can't comply to these new stricter safety zones? What if we did implement a safe space for women and this venue was too small to offer a roped off section for women? There's a lot of issues that need to be resolved before we can figure out a solution. It's just a tidbit, but as I was going to record, I saw another comment that I don't have a screenshot of, but they suggested that perhaps Amel could do some women-only shows. I think, even though you heard my opinion about gender segregation, I think that's a wonderful idea, because Amel is clearly about her female audience. She clearly cares about them. She writes a lot of songs specifically for her female audience. I think it would make sense for them to do a female only show. I think that makes a lot of sense for their brand. I think that the audience would love that. I think that a lot of the girls who have experienced negative things at the Amel shows would be like, finally, you know, a show I can go to and feel safe, like I belong at this show. And yeah, I love that idea as well. Personally, I believe that we as the people need to speak up about wanting change and about feeling unsafe in the music industry. I think regulation needs to be enacted so that venues comply with managing crowds and instances of sexual assault, because I think, as we've seen, it isn't good enough. The direct response is not there. The fact that, you know, you have to email the venue afterwards to tell them what had occurred, and you did not receive any assistance in the moment when so many awful things were happening to you, Amaya, I do not think is okay. I think that we need to do something about that to ensure that if something of that magnitude or any magnitude is occurring, that it can be responded to. Because hearing about what has happened to you has made me feel extremely unsafe in Brisbane, and the other women that is happening to all across Australia. I don't feel safe going to concerts. I've always felt pretty awkward going to concerts. I've always felt a little bit unsafe, and this is just magnifying my fear, and that's why I want to talk about this, because I'm sure other women, other non-binary people, other people that identify as femme in some kind of way are looking at this and they are scared, and I want to talk about why we are feeling scared, why that divide is there, how it is created. So I hope I've explained myself well. I also want to add, because I can't fucking let it go, every bloody venue should have free water. Like, come on, water should not be a luxury. I'm already paying insane bloody concert prices due to the industry being fucked by corrupt mega ticketing corporations. You think I have the bloody money to buy merch of my bias and water and the Uber ride home, and like, not a chance in this fucking economy am I paying 6 AUD for a bottle of water. It is free from the tap. Free from the tap. Anyway, thanks for listening to me yap about that. I think it's an important discussion to be had, and I hope you'll let me know some of your opinions in the comments, and in the words of Amel and the Sniffers, you should not be doing that. This is Editing Dylan here. I just wanted to say that I'm actually kind of a bit sick at the moment. I have a bit of a chest infection, and that was my second time filming this video because I lost the first version of it. I deleted it somehow. I don't know. I'd finished editing it. I put in all the videos, all the captions, everything, and I deleted the video because I was trying to clear storage, and I didn't realize that I deleted the wrong one. I thought it was an old copy that I messed up, and anyway, it's been a lot, and it's very hot here because it's summer, and it's just been a lot, and I tried my best. It's my first video. I hope it came across okay. It is very heavy subject matter, and I picked that for my first video, so good on me. I hope I covered it well. If you did enjoy, I will be making more videos about just the world, not just Australia, but music. I'll be making videos just about anything that interests me, movies, so subscribe if you want to see more of that. I mean, I'm just some idiot, but if you enjoy me, keep enjoying me, I guess. Anyway, see ya.